Now, now that we're speaking about clients and sort of like that process, a client comes to you and say, "Hey, I want to get a divorce. I have a lot of assets. I don't want, I want it to be amicable, but I don't want to end up losing everything." Can you just talk about like your normal process?
That's every day. It's every day. And the problem, so I wish, one of my dreams would be that people would come in to see me and say, me and my spouse, we both at the same moment decided we want a divorce. And we're both on the same page. That would be wonderful. It's not a great thing to want a divorce, but at least the hard part for me is that somebody wants it sooner than or more than the other side. And that's what creates the friction. If it was a business transaction, if you knew you needed a car and you had a budget of $10,000, then you'd come into my car dealership and we'd figure out what can you afford, and it would be done. But instead, you come in and you want a car, and the person you're buying it from, your spouse, doesn't want to sell. They want to keep the relationship going. They don't want to be at a car dealership. They don't want to be in the process of divorce. And that's hard. So then how do I advise you? What do you do? And we talk about how many assets you have and how complicated it is. And maybe I say, if you go to court, this is what will happen. But if you really want it over, you might have to give her or him more money. And then you say to me, why? That's not fair. And I say, because she doesn't want a divorce and she's going to drag this out. And so you might have to give her more than you should. Those are hard conversations. And so it's what I like, because you try to figure out what's important to somebody. Really, what is important? Sometimes it's, I just want to decide where my daughter goes to college because college education was the most important thing in my life. Or I want to stay in this house because my parents raised me in this house and I want to make sure that I get to decide what happens with this house. That's more important than the beach house or the 401k. And so listening is a big part of what we do. There's a Chinese proverb, you learn more when you're listening than when you're talking. I don't know if it's a Chinese proverb, but I heard it was.
Hey, it sounds good.
Yeah.
So are you saying that it might be a little helpful maybe before people get married or right when they get married and they maybe want like a prenuptial agreement? Does that kind of help make the divorce process a little easier?
So that's a whole other discussion, a prenuptial agreement.
Okay.
And that's fine, we can talk about it. Certainly you should talk to your spouse or your fiance about what your goals and ambitions are. Talking about a prenup, to me, it's a great thing. Because whether you sign a prenup or not, it at least lets you see what the other side is thinking and what their insecurities are. If someone grew up poor and said, you know what, I grew up poor and I can be poor again. I'm not marrying you for your money. I don't need a prenup. Or I grew up poor and I never want to be poor again. So if I marry you, I want to make sure that if we get divorced, I'm secure. You start to learn about people, and when you learn about how they feel about money, and again, money's the only thing that's relevant in a prenup. You can't decide who's going to be the custodial parent, because by the time you have kids, you might be a drug addict or they might be a drug addict. You can't decide ahead of time what's good for kids, but you can decide what to do with the money. I think it's a great idea to think about and to have. You save a lot of money. I mean, the cost for me to represent somebody in a divorce without a prenup is usually 10 times what it would be with a prenup. Because you go and think about it, if you're a judge and two people come before you and they say, Judge, we signed this prenuptial agreement that says what should happen if we get divorced. But now we want you to figure it out. If you're the judge, you know what you're thinking? You guys are grown-ups, you had lawyers, you're doing what you agreed to.
Right.
Next case. And so that's usually what happens. So prenuptial agreements are good to discuss. And sometimes you have people that talk about a prenuptial agreement and realize they're not suited. They're not meant to be together because somebody thinks they're entitled to all this money and the other side thinks they're not, or she's not, or he's not. But what it really does is it avoids complicated, ugly, expensive divorces and divorce lawyers and divorce judges. So it's a conversation worth having, But I could tell you all day long the reasons not to have them. There are romantic reasons. Somebody's parents might have had an ugly fight about the prenuptial agreement and that caused them to have a hard marriage. Each case is unique, but certainly you should ask the questions. What do you think about a prenuptial agreement? And just see how your fiance responds and then take it from there.